Welcome to Pixel Football, and today we're looking at Kevin De Bruyne and the news that he's leaving Man City at the end of the season. So it seems like a good time to look at his legacy, not only at City, but the Premier League itself. And later in the video, we'll be comparing him to other Premier League greats and discuss whether he would make an all-time Premier League 11. And we'd love to hear what you think, so don't forget to let us know in the comments. But first, it's easy to forget that De Bruyne's introduction to the Premier League was actually initially unsuccessful when he joined Chelsea in 2012. And it got me thinking, De Bruyne turned out to be one of the best players of his generation, yet his impact in the Premier League wasn't immediate. In today's game, players are written off too quickly and seen as little more than commodities that either succeed or fail. Maybe players like De Bruyne remind us that football is a human endeavour, and sometimes things just don't work out. But that doesn't mean they won't somewhere else. So who knows, maybe one of those countless Chelsea players who can't get a sniff at a game at the moment might end up becoming a generational talent somewhere else. So after a spell at Wolfsburg, De Bruyne came back to the Premier League and signed for Man City in 2015, just a year before Pep joined the club. So he's been an integral part of Guardiola's City story from the very start. During Pep's reign, City have enjoyed one of the most successful spells in English football history and arguably assembled the best team of the Premier League era. So before we compare De Bruyne to some of the greatest Premier League players of all time, let's first look at him alongside some of the best midfielders from City in the Sheikh Mansour era. City have had so many great players in that time, including Gundogan and Bernardo Silva, but for me, three of the best and probably closest to De Bruyne is Yaya Touré, David Silva and Phil Foden. All of them are fantastic, and they've all had moments where they look basically unplayable, but if you had to pick just one player from this group, it has to be Kevin De Bruyne. You can't measure everything by stats alone, but if you look at the numbers, Kevin De Bruyne comes out on tops not only for goals, but assists as well. And even though Phil Foden has a higher goals per game ratio, the sheer number of assists that De Bruyne has produced puts him on another level. So De Bruyne stands above the rest from this dominant City era. Every footballing dynasty has its shining lights, and as his time comes to an end at City, should we be comparing him to some of the other midfield greats of the Premier League era, or has he actually eclipsed some or all of them? But before we get into it, just a quick note, I'm not going to compare him to players like Patrick Vieira and Roy Keane. Yes, they're both widely regarded as some of the best midfielders in Premier League history, but for me, they just play a completely different game. Sure, they chipped in with goals and assists, but that wasn't the core of their game. They brought different attributes to their respective teams. So if you were picking a best Premier League 11, I don't think you'd be choosing between Kevin De Bruyne and either Roy Keane or Patrick Vieira. They're just too stylistically different. So instead, I'll be comparing him to three players who are consistently mentioned as the most progressive midfielders in Premier League history, in Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes. And then David Beckham, who I'll come on to shortly. And again, to compare these players on stats and achievements alone is really hard because it only really tells half a story. If we look at silverware, then Steven Gerrard didn't win as much as the others, most notably never win the Premier League title itself, which is a funny one because he's always mentioned as one of the Premier League greats and playing for one of the biggest English football sides of all time, yet he actually failed to win the biggest domestic prize around. So I can understand the argument that this actually completely discounts him from the conversation completely. But then the trophies he did win, he played a crucial role in, literally dragging Liverpool over the line sometimes, as he was playing for a far inferior team when compared to all the other three. With Frank Lampard, it's hard to argue against the amount of goals he scored from midfield, but he's generally considered not to be as technically accomplished as the other three here. But when you actually look at Kevin De Bruyne's goal ratio, it's actually not that far behind Frank Lampard's. But the thing that stands out most for me is the amount of assists that De Bruyne has when compared with the others. He has more than all three and has practically played half the games of the rest of them, which is frankly incredible. I'm not sure we've ever seen a player in the Premier League with De Bruyne's level of vision. And looking at their stats, plus at the way they all played the game, for me, De Bruyne encompasses many of the different qualities these players had, but in one player. He had the match-winning quality of Gerrard, the goals and end product of Lampard, and the vision and craft of a player like Scholes. One other player to mention is David Beckham, who isn't normally in the conversation for one of the Premier League's greatest ever midfielders, but he definitely defined a certain era of Man United's success, and people have likened De Bruyne to the way that David Beckham actually played. The pair have actually played a really similar amount of Premier League games and have a really similar goal-scoring record. But again, De Bruyne's assist record is way ahead of Beckham's, whose career was so heavily defined on his final balls and crossing. It just again shows how impressive De Bruyne's record is. But I've seen a few conversations recently asking if De Bruyne would actually make an all-time Premier League 11. So here's an example of a typical 11 you might see. I'm not saying this is my favourite 11, but it just represents some of the players that are often included. And if we reserve a space for a more defensively minded midfielder like Vieira or Keane or even Rodri perhaps, then that leaves 2 spaces for more attacking midfielders. And in the past, those spaces for most people have been between Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes. And for me sometimes, in these conversations about best 11s and top 10s, there can actually be a really heavy recency bias. But when it comes to the all-time Premier League 11, I actually think there's a primacy bias. Like Peter Schmeichel is always the goalkeeper, and obviously because he was a great player. But sometimes it feels like because he was the first defining goalkeeper of the Premier League era, no one can ever dismount him, even though other players could be above him, like Peter Cech or Alisson. And I think that's been the case for attacking midfielders as well. Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes have had a firm grip on that status. But for me, whether you look at it from a stats point of view or the artistry of the players, De Bruyne should now be considered the first name on that team sheet when it comes to attacking midfielders. And I think most defining teams of the Premier League have their representatives as well, and City deserve at least one place in an all-time 11. And I believe that Kevin De Bruyne is well worthy of that place. But I want you to tell me where you rank De Bruyne among players like Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes, and whether you would include him in your Premier League all-time 11. So don't forget to like the video and let me know in the comments. And if he does make the cut, at whose expense? Which one of the players that I've discussed would you leave out? Thanks for watching Pixel Football, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content coming your way soon.